Have you attended the fly fishing show recently? Did you know that the fly fishing show by the Furimskys is the largest fly fishing show in the world? And what is it about these shows that's made them so successful in the past and today? Today you're going to find out what's new with the fly fishing show so you know how to get more out of it if you attend this season. This is the Wet Fly Swing podcast where I show you the best places to travel to for fly fishing, how to find the best resources and tools to prepare for that big trip, and what you can do to give back to the fish species you love. Hey, I'm Dave, host of the Wet Fly Swing podcast. I've been fly fishing since I was a little kid. I grew up around a little fly shop and have created one of the largest fly fishing podcasts in this country. I've also interviewed more of the greatest fly anglers and celebrities in the space than just about anyone out there. Ben Furimsky, owner of the Fly Fishing Show, is here to take us into a deep dive behind the scenes of the show. We're going to get into it all today. You're going to find out why his event planner job, his current role, is one of the toughest jobs in the world. You're going to find out why a fly designer is like a chef. We're going to talk about that today. Ben is a fly designer. He's also has been a guide for many years in the past. And we're going to let you know why you should be attending this year and why you should attend the full show and not just an hour. You got to stay for the full day if you're going to make it for one of these. All right, plus you're going to find out about the new Consumer Choice Awards that they do at the show. Here we go. Let's get into it. Ben Furimsky from flyfishingshow.com. How you doing, Ben?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for doing this again. I had to look back at the archives, episode 61, February 2019, and I think we're close to 660. So it's been about 600 episodes since we had you on. So I'm excited to catch up with you on everything. How have things been going since? I guess we've been through COVID and everything, but what's been new in the last few years with you guys?
Yeah, I was going to say if it was 2019, there's been quite a lot that's happened. You know, for us, it's been a big adjustment recovering from COVID. Since then, we've changed one venue in Denver because the Denver Mart, where we were for 25 years, I believe it was, or 24 years, they closed during the shutdown. They went bankrupt. So
oh, wow.
a lot of the event industry was really hurt. We didn't get the loans and the support like a lot of industry unless you were like basically Hollywood or Broadway. Concerts, things like that. They've got the support, but small business events like conventions and fairs and things like that got nothing. Most of them just shut down for a while and many didn't return. But we fought through it. We kept open the whole time. We missed, a season of events and had to delay some others, but we were able to come back. And then after we got the shows back on track, we added back in our Bellevue, Seattle location. We had been in the Pacific Northwest in Linwood prior to that. And then years ago, we were in Bellevue when we first were in the Pacific Northwest. So it was a return to our original location there, which was actually back at that time was one of our bigger shows. So last year was the first time back there. So that's a new event that we're building back up.
Gotcha. Yeah. So, and then everything else is the same. All the other shows around the country you guys still do.
Yeah, I guess I'm trying to think. So probably since 2019, our venue in Atlanta, even though it's the same venue, that's going under a whole master plan remodel. So we're actually in a brand new facility within the same convention center, which allowed us to expand. So we've got a bigger show floor in Atlanta, modern new facility that we were one of the first events in that section of the hall, I believe, once they finished the remodel, because they finished that during COVID. So we came back to a brand new facility there.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, obviously you guys have a lot going. You're the largest fly fishing show in the world, right? I mean, I think that's one of your big claims, right? And that hasn't changed, right? There's not anybody else out there taking you guys down from the leading spot there.
No, not even close. I mean, probably some of those changes have actually limited that.
Oh, right.
There's just really no other events globally that come close to the numbers that we bring in as far as customers.
Yeah.
Or exhibitors.
Yeah, exactly. And we were down, and like you said, we definitely, I try to get to as many shows as I can. The Denver show, I was at the new location. It was great great facility, everything there, and we're hoping to get out to more this year. I think I'm not sure if I'll get back east this year, but I'm trying to. So good. Well, I wanted to talk today, and you mentioned some changes. I guess one thing maybe from the start, the Consumer Choice Awards I want to talk about and things like that. But talk about like right now, it's September going into October. Right now, where are you at with your thing? Are you getting close to when do you get fired up for the shows? When does it really kick in? You're like, okay, time to turn it up a notch.
That's a great question because a lot of people, I mean, even longtime exhibitors of ours will sometimes talk to me in the fall now, even later, and they say, "Oh, I bet you're starting to get busy." And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm busy for 2028. I'm
Right.
negotiating contracts for 2028 right now." Literally had an email this week that's like, "If you don't get this stuff in, we're not sure if we can get you dates."
Oh, wow.
So we work so far in advance that, most people have no clue. Right now, as far as the 2025 event, final contracts were due September 21st for exhibitors. Unfortunately, one thing that I'm sure a lot of people have seen since COVID, it seems like people are behind in everything. So we're still waiting on quite a few contracts. In 2020, we were sold out in most of our events by now. At least I think, 5 of 7 at that time were probably sold out, or 4 of 7, and the rest sold out pretty quickly after. We may sell out on some of our events as early as this week. So anybody out there that's looking to get a contract in better do it ASAP.
Yeah. And these events, and this is part of the thing, like if there was a brand that wanted to join to having, a 10 by 10 or something like that, they need to get that in quick.
Yeah. And Dave, this is something for our exhibitors out there. The reason we have that deadline, of course, it has to do with finances and bills and deposits that we have due. So we need to generate the revenue from their deposits for their exhibitor space. But we also, for our timeline, we need to have those contracts in order to move forward on to some of the other steps that can help them have a better show. So the sooner they get in the contracts, the more promotions we can do for those exhibitors. And the more that, even if we were talking about specific exhibitors on this, they're getting promotions. If you had a question on somebody, more customers will be coming in. I can start to work on floor plans and things like that are due to get out to the customers to build momentum and build energy for the events. But what I'm working on, even after we're done today, I was just working on my to-do list, and I'll be working on some, updating the website and posting some celebrities that are going to be speaking at some of the shows today, hopefully working on some of the seminar schedules and things like that, making sure I've gotten presentation titles from the speakers, those sorts of things I'm fine-tuning right now. I usually try to have all those by the end of August. The challenge with some of that stuff is, as many people know, a lot of our featured speakers are also, during the summer, they're full-time guides. So they're busy working every day. And, I guided for 23 years myself. So I know that those days can be long, especially when you're reaching like the end of your season. You're out of flies, your gear's beat up, and those days are much longer than most people realize. I mean, if you're meeting your guide at 9:00, he's probably been, at it for shuttles and things like that, getting food ready since at least 7:00. And then you're
Right.
done at 5 and he's cleaning up the boat and
Yeah.
getting stuff ready for the next day. And it's,
12-hour day.
7 yeah, another couple hours after that until you're ready for your trip the next day.
Yep.
So those guys are busy, and like to get them to send over descriptions of classes and titles can take a little bit of time. So that starts to, we catching up on that usually now as people start to slow down and people are back to school and their guide trips slow down depending on where they are. People up in Alaska are still out in the bush in remote places for another couple of weeks, and then all of a sudden we get a flurry of another group of people, and that's where the other things start to sell out.
Well, if somebody was to send in like a small brand, the contract paperwork and a check, would they be guaranteed a spot at a show, or is there limited space now for shows?
Well, honestly, we don't guarantee anything after June 1st.
Yeah, after
That's
June
the date
1st.
that we give to returning exhibitors and guarantee them that they can have their same spot and that they can have a booth. But right now, yeah, if they send in, there's a good chance. Like I said, we have a few shows that are on the verge of selling out. They could happen any day. They would be pretty high at the top of the wait list if they did get that. And there's always a few changes where,
Yeah,
someone runs into a conflict and has to change the show. And,
sure.
unfortunately, there's some, negative reasons. Someone gets in a car accident or whatever happens like that, and they have
Health.
to
Yeah,
cancel. We always work with people like that, but that's where we can jump on the wait list, and someone that's early and ready to pay gets in pretty easily. So the first couple people are usually able to get in off of a wait list, or we can look at alternate locations where we may have space.
yeah, gotcha. What about at the shows? So, and we've worked with a number of the people, and I've probably had maybe most of the people that you have as your celebrities, I think, on the podcast. But how do you balance? Do you have mostly celebrities and then some local people? I mean, I guess everybody's celebrities, but do you have a mix of, like, say, the Phil Roys, the Landon Mayers who travel with the show versus, say, local folks in the area in, New Jersey, things like that? Or is that a mix up of people there?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. We have some of the headliners like Phil or Landon or Gary Borger that will do Ed Engel, Jason Randall. Those are some of the top people that we have traveling around the country. And they focus on subject matter that's more of, sort of a technique type thing that's applicable no matter where you are as an angler. And then obviously we have the regional stuff that may focus on either, the hot local species, like it could be steelhead in the Pacific Northwest, stripers in New Jersey, things like that, that we would have the local professionals talk on, as well as local experts on regional hotspots. Again, it could be stripers in New Jersey, or the Delaware River in New Jersey, or the Arkansas River in Colorado, or Pyramid Lake out of California over the border in Nevada, which consider maybe visiting next month myself.
Yeah, nice. Pyramid Lake?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
My kiddo and I were thinking about driving out that way for his fall break and getting a couple days fishing.
Oh, cool. Cool. Yeah, because are you in Colorado?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Nice. And were you originally from, or where was because we had your dad on a while back too. Did you grow up out east, back east?
I did. I grew up between New Jersey and Pennsylvania.
Yeah, New Jersey. And you made the move, was the Colorado move like for guiding in that time when you moved out?
Yeah, well, it was originally for ski coaching. I started teaching and coaching skiing when I was 15. And after college, I took a break to come out here, and then I decided to spend the summer and guide. And next thing I know, it was 28 years.
Right. That's right. And then I'll put a link in the show notes to the podcast we had with your dad and with you in the past, but just an update. And then so your dad's been running this forever. Is he still involved, or is he pretty much out of the show circuit
Yeah, I
scene
mean,
now?
he's for the fly fishing show. He started it originally with a partner. He had an event called Fly Fishers Symposium, and his partner Barry Serviente had a small event in eastern Pennsylvania, and they decided to combine their efforts and do the first fly fishing show in Somerset, New Jersey. And it was a big hit, and of course we continued that one, and now it's moved and changed venues into Edison because the Somerset location closed down as well. The facility closed down. It was purchased in, I think is a warehouse now, or it may have
Yeah.
even been leveled. I can't remember
Uh,
at this
what
point.
year was that first show? The first show you guys had?
I think that was 1993, if I'm correct.
93. Yep.
Yeah. So that was the first one, titled The Fly Fishing Show. Of course, there were several years before that. I don't know the first year that the Fly Fishers Symposium started off the top of my head, but I was in high school. They had first my dad had something called Trout Masters Weekend, which was a weekend long private event. So you had to register in advance, and it was limited in people. And we had Lefty Kreh was the headline there, And we went from that, then through developing a friendship with Lefty, and George Harvey was his fly fishing instructor at Penn State, legendary George Harvey, who was now, our one of our most legendary speakers, Joe Humphreys, was his mentor. And through their friendships, that's where they kind of said, hey, we need you to do this sort of event. No one does anything like this for fly fishing specific, because my dad's side, or his main business really at the time was in the leather goods, and he would do some sportsman shows as an exhibitor. So he had a little idea from the exhibitor side, and those guys, through their friendship, just decided and guided him into doing the first fly fishing events. And he did that at Seven Springs Mountain Resort in Pennsylvania, where his leather goods store was. Through his connections there, he was able to use their exhibit center, and that was the start. And I've been in and around the events myself then since I was about 13, working in the industry. So I've done about every role in our company, and have worked my way through until eventually buying out my dad and taking over.
Right.
So he's kind of at all the shows now as sort of a figurehead. And
yeah, he's still there.
Yeah, and there's no way of keeping him down. When I started the Atlanta event, a funny story is I was like, well, Dad, we don't need you there because you don't know anything about the venue. It's a new event. There's no need for you to go. And he's like, okay. And he calls me maybe a month later, and he's like, I bought a plane ticket. I'm just going to come down anyway. So I'm like, well, awesome. If you're coming down, I'll give you some duties. So
discover Smitty's Fly Box for premium flies. Their monthly subscription service delivers expertly crafted flies and materials tailored to your fishing environment. Boasting over 30 years of experience, Smitty's is your trusted source for a diverse range of flies. Enhance your fishing experience and make life easier with their carefully created selections. You can subscribe right now at smittysflybox.com and join a community of passionate anglers. Drifthook is your trusted source for high-quality flies that level up your fly fishing experience. I use and love Drifthook's hand-selected flies, and they offer a money-back guarantee for any reason if you're not satisfied. You can order today right now at drifthook.com and use the code SWING at checkout for 15% off your next order. That's Drifthook, DRIFTHOOK.com. Check it out now. What's out of all the duties you've done, what do you think is the hardest job in everything?
Well, actually, I was talking to a buddy of mine just yesterday who runs similar events in the car industry. And he and I both agree that hotels are the worst. It's just every year you have a new contact. The only reason we do hotel blocks is to create an environment for everybody to be together. We're a social group, the fly anglers, we all have something to talk about. And, we just meet afterwards and hang out, have a few beers, or people go out to dinner together and hang out at the hotel. And by putting everybody together, it really helps the energy of the industry and fires up customers when they wander down to the bar and they're sitting there and talking, and next thing they know that they didn't even realize they're sitting right next to their favorite author, or a legendary fly angler that they didn't recognize, and they're just starstruck. And it's pretty cool to create that. And also, by developing the group blocks at the hotels, we give price breaks that we just pass on to the customers, exhibitors, and day guests that they're allowed to, get in on the discounted rate at the hotels. And that helps create that environment. But we get nothing out of it except for like a headache. And
right.
And then the next year you're dealing with someone new that doesn't know your event. And they have a lot of turnover in the hotel world.
Right. That can't be a good thing. It seems like if there's a lot of turnover, there's something wrong there, right?
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is, you'll have a contact there, and then they're at another hotel the next year, and then they're back at the hotel. I don't know what it is. They switch around. And I think a lot of ownerships of the hotels, you may as a guest go into the hotel and know it as one thing, but there's how many brands are under just the Hilton brand itself, so maybe they switch them around internally. I'm sure people are working up the corporate ladder, and a role opens up at a different hotel that's within the same brand. So they move over there and, work their way around, which makes it challenging because they're learning everything new, just as you have to teach your contact about your event. And when you have someone good that's back every year, it's easy for us because then we say, hey, we want to do the same things last year. And they send over a contract and you sign it. Otherwise, it's like months or weeks of negotiation and correcting links and dates and all that
Right.
stuff.
So that's all the work. I mean, that's the work you're basically doing behind the scenes along with, I'm sure, your staff there. So that's not always the funnest, easiest work.
Oh yeah, well that's what, to your question. I mean, that's the least fun thing. I
Yeah.
mean, I don't even get to talk about fishing. Um,
Right. Right.
every once in a while, and it's great. Like we run into a contact, whether it's a hotel or one of our decorators that is an angler themselves, and I'm like, great. I mean, for example, on that, it took when we started in Atlanta, I think it took me a month of back and forth to explain what our casting ponds
Oh,
were
right.
to the venue. They're like,
Jeez.
well, how much water is going to be in it? What are there fish that are going to be in it? Are you
Right.
using hooks? What do you do when you catch a fish? I'm like, there's no fish in it. It's simply to create surface tension for casting the fly line, as we all know.
Yeah.
But if you've never even seen fly fishing, or
Yeah. You have no
have
idea.
the vaguest image of angling itself, it's super hard to explain to somebody. And we build them
Oh, you
ourselves.
do?
That's something that, yeah, I own and build all the ponds ourselves. So when we go in, we do that. And
Is it just like one of those, pools you would put up in your backyard that's a temporary, like swimming pool, like that sort of same idea, like for the bottom?
well, a few years ago, yeah, we actually invested into that type of vinyl bottom that's more attractive, and we've now got our value out of it. But just a single liner, and we do two of those, is about 10 grand.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so that's
Jeez.
we've got those out there, and then someone goes and you're looking, and someone's just about to drive their truck across it,
Jeez.
and you're yelling, and
Oh, man.
it can be stressful for a little bit. You're
Yeah.
like, don't drive on that,
God.
and running across the venue to stop somebody
Yeah.
while you're laying it out. And then we have a framework that holds it, and you'd be surprised at how on those facilities how unlevel the floors are as well.
Right.
Because if it was perfect, ideally, an eighth of an inch, a millimeter of water would be plenty enough for casting purposes to create that surface tension. So you could do things like roll cast and water load and show the different types of cast that the presenters want to do, or test rods. But because they're unlevel, in order to get the water in there, one side might just be to that millimeter and the other side might be a half inch deep, maybe even more. So that's where like some of the volume of water comes into play, and then we got to worry about leaks and things like that. So it's kind of it's a stressful part of the operation.
Well, what about I mean, one of the things that probably isn't as stressful looking back at some of the people, maybe the encounters you've had, right? You mentioned Lefty, Kreh. As you look back over the years, do you think of that, like some of the people you've kind of encountered over the years, and are there any memorable moments that you think about over since you were 13?
Oh, I mean, that's why I come back to it every day. That's the opposite side of your question. On what's the hard part? I mean, that's the great part. I mean, I've not only befriended most of the legendary anglers, in the industry, but I've also learned from them. I've been able to talk to them, and I can call them to discuss things. I mean, or I can call and talk to the top expert in a region or for a species and be like, hey, I'm going, like for Pyramid Lake, I could call any of the guys that run all the guide trips there. They're friends of mine, and say, hey, how's the fishing right now? What flies should I bring? And probably even if they're not working, they could be like, well, I'll go fishing with you, you know?
Right.
So that's a huge benefit. I mean, most of us in the industry, we didn't get into fly fishing to
No, become a
as
billionaire.
a profession to make $1 million. We got into it because to support our habit
Yeah.
and because of our passion for it. And as those speakers and with me, we have a passion for the education of it and conservation. And those two things really excel most of it, and they should. And that's, I mean, that's one of the things, like you brought up Lefty, and I did too. I mean, he was an educator beyond others. I don't know if we will ever have another
Right.
person like Lefty Kreh because of the way he had to build himself up and the work that he had to do. He was a professional writer. He ran events himself.
Oh, he did.
He ran tournaments.
Yeah.
He was a professional photographer.
Right.
He did a lot of things that you don't even have to do now. I mean, you could sit at home with your phone and, be the insta famous next insta
Right.
famous person. But that
Right.
might not mean that you have any knowledge on the industry or the sport. You might be a professional at content gathering,
Right.
but you may not be able to go out and do the things that he could do. And one of the cool things with Lefty, like for example, on your questions, just for people who will never get to meet him now, is Lefty was a person that you could ask a question about almost anything in the world, and he would be able to give you some guidance on it. Any fishing destination, any species, nearly anything like that. And he was able to give you some guidance on that. I mean, the closest person that may be able to do that these days would be Jeff Currier.
Oh, Jeff. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, I just recently read that I forget where he is now,
It's close
480
to
some
500. Oh, he's
species.
close. He's close to 500.
Yeah, I think he's close to 500 species on the fly rod. So, if you wanted to ask somebody about an exotic species or an exotic location, you may just be going on a random vacation. You're like, hey, I'm a passionate fly angler, but I happen to be doing this business trip or this vacation to wherever, Bali, I don't know, what can I fish for there? Those two guys could be someone that could actually give you accurate information to do it.
Yeah.
Where on the other hand, you have someone like Joe Humphreys, who's probably one of the best trout anglers in the world. And, he's fished for a lot of different stuff as well. But when it comes down to trout, there's probably nobody that can catch them better than Joe.
I have heard some stories about Joe on the water where, I had this one Project Healing Water stories where they're on the water, nobody was catching anything, and he went in there with like some flip-flops and a pair of shorts, and it was like 40-degree water, and just proceed to slay the fish, right? Like that's Joe.
He can just clean up after you no matter what. Yeah. It's kind of amazing, and it's just so great to watch.
Well, what do you think about looking at because I think of Lefty Kreh, and of course there will never be another Lefty and folks like that. But when you look at today, because of all the people you mentioned, Jeff Currier, Landon Mayer, these folks like that, do you think that in time these people will become similar in stature, right, to like the lefties and others of the old? Or do you think it's more like it was a different time, those people were in World War II and all this stuff, and it was just different? Or do you think people now are going to be those people?
Well, both. I mean, it was definitely a different time. And like I say, the things that Lefty had to do and learn to work his way up to where he is. And one thing that he advised any newcomer, and some of those people that you mentioned were advised by Lefty when he was still around, because it wasn't very long ago. He was still speaking at our events when he was 94 years
Oh,
old.
wow, that's right.
That passion for the sport is what kept him vibrant. And same with Joe. But they would tell anybody that you have to diversify to be at that level. And by diversify, I mean, like you have to be a good presenter. You have to learn how to take good photographs. You have to learn how to teach. It's not just about, who can cast the furthest or who can catch the most fish. And, it's never about who can catch the most fish. It's, one of the things that I enjoy teaching people myself, or when I'm guiding. I was notorious for, when I was guiding, to change somebody's rig when they were doing well. We were just talking about this at my kids' soccer game over the weekend, and how it's a sport, and like, some coaches will run up the score, as we know in it,
Oh,
in
right.
any team or whatever, and just completely drill the other team.
Jeez. Yeah.
Where you have other coaches that are like, okay, we're in a comfortable lead. Let's put in B team and C team, and those coaches are the ones that stay
Yeah.
strong over the years rather than fluctuating, because they have depth in their team.
Yeah.
And what I would do is take, someone's doing good. I'm like, all right, you caught enough fish this way. Let's try this technique and see how it goes. And the advantage that I had through doing some of that on my side as the guide is conditions would change. And because I was constantly testing things with my clients, I was teaching them new techniques in the process, which they appreciated, because I would tell any of my clients, hey, I can't guarantee you fish. I can guarantee you'll learn something today if you want to. If you want to learn something, I can teach you something at the very least about my local waters, if not new techniques and things like that. Because fishing's fishing. We can't always catch fish, and we shouldn't strive to do that. It's about learning about the environment. We know that you go through those stages where you're stoked to catch your first fish, and then you want to catch more and more and more. Then you want to catch some bigger ones. Then you want to catch more big ones. And then all of a sudden you realize, like, you're just as happy to catch this really beautiful one, or the one
Right.
that was the really challenging fish that was, 10 feet back under a
Right. Or under a different technique, right? Or you're catching it with whatever, a swung fly
fly you tied. Yeah.
on the surface. Yeah.
Exactly. But for me, as as the guide, I would be ahead of the curve when conditions changed. And suddenly, the rig that every guide had on wasn't working. And they'd come to me and they'd be, my other friend guides, they'd be like, what are you using? I'm like, I'm using this now. And they're like, oh, okay. Because I realized, like, I was ahead of, like, the hatch curve, and
Sure.
the bugs that started moving that you're not seeing yet, but they're becoming more active because the hatch was coming in a week or two.
Was this in Colorado where you were guiding?
Yeah, I've also guided in New Jersey in the Salt,
Okay.
but most of my guiding, I was full-time guide here in Colorado while I was running the events as well.
Oh, right. What streams were you guiding on?
Gunnison is my home river, but
Gunnison.
all the water's there around it.
Yeah, Gunnison. Nice. Yeah, I haven't fished the Gunnison yet. That's definitely a big name you hear about. Do you still get out there and fish it?
Oh yeah, I fished the day before yesterday for a little bit. I had to run some errands, and it was a dreary day in September here, and I kept procrastinating because the weather was dreary, and kept getting sucked into the computer for work. But I needed to run some errands during business hours, and wanted to stop at the river. And I got there right as the sun broke out, and of course, as I knew, and I was kicking myself, every fish was sipping blue wing olives everywhere, and I had like a quick half hour, and then it shut off, because once the sun came out, they
Oh,
shut
they
down.
stopped, right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I was like, I should have motivated in the crummy weather.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, the Gunnison. Cool. Well, what about, we mentioned at the start, the Consumer Choice Awards. Maybe you could talk about that. I think that's something new you guys have going. Then anything else new that people can expect this year at the shows?
Oh yeah, yeah. The Consumer Choice Awards is something new. We talked about new venues and some new locations and stuff. And of course, we always have some new speakers and new exhibitors. But the Consumer Choice Awards, we started in 2020. Of course, that was when everything was shut down. So it was kind of a soft start. So sort of we're going into year 4 here, which is about the time anything that we do at our events starts to get a little more stride. And the Consumer Choice Awards are for any exhibitor. They're allowed to enter a product that they may manufacture or distribute. It's not really for like the retailer to enter product. It's from the source. And they enter the product, which is open now. We just started product entry this week through December 15th. And so the manufacturers can enter their products. And then in the first day of our first event, which is January 17th, until the day after our last event, which will be March 17th, it's open for voting by the consumers. So the goal is to provide a venue where the consumers can vote for products. All other awards in our industry prior to the Consumer Choice Awards were either just elected like by choice by the board, or a single person, an editor, or the industry itself. So this allows the consumers to have a voice to show what they like, which could be different than the pros that may, that just out of their skill level, they may like a different product than the consumers. And you can come to the events and actually put your hands on these products and test them at the ponds, or review them on site, talk to the manufacturer itself, go compare it to the other ones that are in the category, and vote for the ones that you feel are best. So it's your opportunity as a consumer to voice what you like, which can help those manufacturers look at that data and develop better products in the end. The other big thing that we did is it's not for new product. We do have a new product category, but we wanted to promote longevity and sustainability in these products and not force manufacturers to do minor changes to their products and call it something new just so they could enter in awards, because it was limited to release date. So we're able to promote a product that someone may be a leader in a category for 10 years because they have the best, most innovative product and no one can catch up to them. And they don't qualify for best new product because they're not new, but they're still the best in that category. So we wanted to allow them to enter it. So it doesn't matter what release date a product may have come out. If it's the best, it's the best by your choice. And voting takes place online. So you can look at the product, you can review it, you can see some other product that may not be on display at your local event. Or if you in an area or unfortunate that you couldn't make the show, you can still review the stuff online and see how the manufacturers promoted it through like videos and descriptions, and be able to vote for it that way. Voters get the opportunity to win some of the product. So there is an incentive beyond just voicing your opinion. And, as we all wish and know, voting can be important. So
Yeah.
it's a good thing to jump in. It doesn't take time. We have 41 categories, but you can vote for one. You don't have to vote for any. So for example, if you're a saltwater expert, you don't have to vote on trout stuff. If you live in Belize, you don't have to vote on waders,
Yeah.
if you don't know anything about them. Just vote on what you know.
Right. And where would you said, was that open right now?
It's open for product submission.
Oh, submission.
And
Gotcha. Yeah. To be the
so
show.
if you're one
Right.
of our exhibitors, now you can now submit product for the Consumer Choice Awards, the Fly Fishing Show Consumer Choice Awards. Voting for customers opens January 17th, which is the first day of our Marlboro event.
That's right, January 17th. And that kicks off the event, which is, January 17th through March 17th. You've got how many, like 7 shows? Is that the total?
Yeah, we have 7 events this year.
7 events in basically 2 months. And does it feel like, I think of it jokingly a little bit, but like the traveling circus, you know what I mean? Like it seems like it's so much, right? All packed into 2 months, and you got, Phil and everybody on board joking and hanging out and stuff. What does it feel like when you guys are doing your 2 months of just does it kind of feel madness at times, or is it pretty clear?
Well, I'm in the job of putting out fires at the event, so it can be madness for me. But all of us it's like, we got to hit the road, and it's dreadful, and you're going to be away from friends and family and traveling, and it's fatiguing and all of that. And we walk into the first event and it's like a family reunion.
Right.
And
what's the first one?
Marlboro, Massachusetts is the first
yeah.
this year, or whatever might be the first one for your circuit, because we got a lot of people that might do 3, 4, or they just do their local one
right.
event.
Yeah.
But the more events that you do, the more you become part of we describe it as the show family. And it's because we spend several months together on the road traveling, and it's a very strong bonding event. We all are friends. We become friends. And when people come on, and if they jump into the circuit their first year and do numerous events, they just can't believe how intertwined everybody is and how they just meet everybody. And they're like, wow, I came into this event and, I was starstruck by like Phil or Landon or any of those guys. And by the end of the tour, they've been invited to go fishing with them and they're buddies and they have dinner together and they're like, wow, this is like, I never even thought that I would be at this level in the industry when I started my company. And it can bring you leaps and bounds by attending our events through your networking, whether it be with the pros or other exhibitors. We've got tons of exhibitors that have made friends just by being at the show with people that are all across the globe. And again, like supporting our habits, like you're getting invited to go fish in Alaska or South America or whatever, because you've become good buddies with the person that runs an operation there, and then you're inviting them up to your operation. And so
Yeah.
it's a network of industry people.
It's time to talk about something that elevates your fishing experience. Stonefly nets. Nestled in the heart of the Ozarks, Ethan, a master craftsman, dedicates his skill to creating the finest wood landing nets. They aren't just tools, they are works of art blending tradition and craftsmanship. Every time I set my Stonefly net in the water, it's not just the fish that catches my eye, it's the beauty of the net itself. These nets are tailored to your fishing style with options to customize the size, handle, and even the intricate wood burls. They are a perfect mix of functionality and aesthetic appeal. And let's talk about the memories. Just like Ethan, many of us cherish fly fishing as a way to connect with our past and creating lasting memories. Stonefly nets are more than just nets. They are part of our story, each cast and every cast. Are you ready to make fishing trips unforgettable? Visit stoneflynets.com right now and discover the difference a handcrafted net can make. What would be your summary for them? Like maybe somebody who hasn't been to this show for a while. What are the things that you think people really stand out that they would want to attend the shows for?
Well, my first tip would really be attend for the whole day, if not the whole weekend, because there are so many things to see and do that you can't do them. The number one feedback that I get from guests that come the first time is that a lot of them plan like a couple hours, or they're used to a smaller event or a club event, which are great and fantastic, but most of the time you can see everything and do everything in 2 or 3 hours, and they come into our event. I mean, I talked to one guy this year that literally walked in, looked around and left. And he's like, I'm coming back for the full day tomorrow. He's like, I thought I was going to come look at this in 2 hours. He's like, I don't even have a chance, and I've got to be somewhere in 2 hours. So I'm going to leave. I don't even want to even start. I'm leaving and coming back tomorrow for the full day.
Nice.
And because there's so much to see and do. So that would be my first tip. Plan for the day. Mm-hmm. The pro guests that we have, they come in with notebooks and agendas, highlighting seminars. Look at the presentation schedule and block out those times for the things that you really want to see. You can't see it all. There's things that are going to overlap. So sometimes you may even go to one presentation and have to leave halfway through to go see another one that you really prioritized. But set an agenda. At the very least, walk the aisles and look at products and things like that. We all, you may or may not need anything, but you might discover something that you didn't realize you needed or wanted. Or you might walk past a booth with a picture of some fish that you've never seen before, and you're like, what the heck is that? And then, you talk to the guy, and this is a real benefit of our shows, just like we talked on the industry side. You might talk to a guy and just say, what is that fish? And find out it's some, cool exotic fish that you've never heard of. And he runs a lodge there. And then you hit it off with the guy because he's cool, or you may have realized that have maybe you guys went to college together and somewhere or something, and you just hit it off, find that the guy's really cool. And you're like, wow, this guy's cool. And this fish looks crazy that I want to catch on a fly rod. And it gives you the reason to visit that lodge, because when you go, just like we talked about fishing, it's not always about the fish, and you can't always guarantee good fishing. But you can go on a fishing trip and have great fishing and a bad trip. And you can go on a fishing trip and have bad fishing and a fantastic trip. And the difference is the people that you're with. And if you already know that the lodge operator and maybe the guide that you may even meet the guide that you could be fishing with, and if you've already befriended them, you know you're going to have a great trip, even if the fishing and you can't predict your conditions. You may hit challenging conditions, but you know that you're going to have a great time. And really, all that's going to do is mean that, we've all been there where you go somewhere and you're like, oh man, I'm in this legendary spot and there was just a terrible storm and the water's flooded or whatever it is. And it just gives you, if you still have a good trip, you're like, I can't wait to come back and hit this in the right conditions.
Right. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, you come back and it's same with, the events. It's like you meet those people, and now people that have attended our shows for 20, 30 years, they're coming back to see their friends. They're not coming back to see, the product or anything, presentations. They do that, but their main reason to come back is to see their friends that they've made, the guides that they've fished with, the lodge owners they book trips with, whoever it is that they've met over the years that they now communicate with, the celebrities that they've befriended.
Right.
And, they become part of the show family.
That's cool. Do you find a lot of competition between, I mean, there's other shows, right? And I look back at the history, the sportsman shows are out there. There's a smaller fly tying and fly fishing expos and things like that. Because you guys aren't everywhere. You've got your 7 spots, but you're not in Montana. You're not in some states that are pretty popular.
Sure.
Yeah. What's your take on that? Is there room for people to come in with their other shows out there?
Oh yeah. There's a reason there's not many people that do my job. I mean, I consider basically there's 2 of us in the nation. An event producer itself ranks in the top 5 most stressful jobs in the nation,
Right.
with air traffic controller, policeman,
No kidding.
fireman, surgeon, and an event producer,
Wow.
because you have a lot of risk in, like I say, I'm planning far out in the future, which,
Right. COVID. Think of that. You've been through COVID, right? You've been through one of those events that, I mean, you're in that industry that just took it down, and I mean, right? So you dealt with it.
yeah, I mean, personally, we haven't shown a profit since COVID. I hope to be back, but I had contracts that I had to pay for in many cases that were
Oh wow.
in place 4 years before COVID. Like, I can't predict that stuff. We have, high risk. Basically, I'm planning all year to open my business for 3 days. So in those 3 days, there can be things like, a snowstorm or whatever might happen. I mean, we've had highways shut down due to, a semi crash or something like that, and people can't get to the venue. Then I don't make any money. It's still my job. I still have staff and employees and celebrities and people to pay. So if it's shut down, I dip into savings to pay them.
Yeah.
I'm not going to stiff anybody. So we have to have a reserve, for events like that. It's high risk. It's stressful. So it's not a job. There's a lot of people that thinks it's a lot easier,
Yeah.
and they'll jump in for it. You'll see lots of events pop up for a year or two,
Right.
and then they disappear because they're like, well, that's a lot more work than I realized. And it's also harder to get exhibitors than you may realize. A lot of people are like, well, I'll just do this event, and of course, like, the top 20 brands, of course, will be there.
Right.
And you call them up and they're like, no.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. That is it. Yeah. That's it. I mean, I'm not even. We're doing some trips, right? We've had our travel program, and I can tell you that's stressful. Just planning a trip where we're setting up a trip for 6 to 8 or 10 people to go out to an event the next year, and 2 people cancel, and
Mhm.
sometimes it's last minute because somebody has some health issue, and yeah, you got to cover that. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, I can't imagine, and what you have is way, way, on steroids, all that. So
Yeah, it's about the same thing time, if you're doing a trip of, whatever, 6 to 12 people, it's times 100,000.
times 100,000, there you go. Right.
Yeah.
God.
I'm literally scheduling people's, like, the working on, you were asking about things I'm working on now. I mean, I'm scheduling hundreds of people's daily, hourly routine for the day, hundreds and hundreds of people. So there's conflicts, and you've got to work out, like, oh, some people can't be there one day, and you got to know that. And and then I got to make sure and do my best to that if someone comes in, let's just say you want to come in and learn about nymph fishing. Well, I don't want to have 3 nymph fishing programs that conflict with each other. I want to spread those out through the day or the weekend so that person can come and see all of those nymph fishing presentations and learn. I really try to focus on something for everybody. Again, like, you asked about the customer, look at what your level is. Look for those things because I do have something. I'll have something that could be for a beginner or something that will blow the mind of 50-year veteran because it might be something new or a different way to look at something or, just some of the best instructors or casters in the world that you can always learn from. Or, my thing is like, hey, if you can't find anything at the show, you could look at a new bamboo rod because our sport is 2,000 years old. There's not new stuff every day, nor do we need new stuff. Go learn about like old techniques or get yourself a new bamboo rod, which is not a new technology, and try that. Or go watch the fly tyers. I've been fly tying my whole life, and I've probably forgotten more techniques or more things than I remember. Uh, and I can go, or you learn a technique and you're like, I don't really see a need for that. And you may go and see someone tie a fly, and you're like, wow, that's a perfect application for this technique that I learned that I don't really know why I learned it. And I can apply it to this fly because there's always something you can learn in fly tying. And if you're not a fly tyer, you can it's an art and you can go appreciate that.
Right. And you still, is the fly tying now, I know you have sessions at the shows, but do you guys also have a separate fly tying session or event you guys do?
Well, my dad still runs a fly tying event that happens in November. It is 2 weekends before Thanksgiving. I can't tell you the exact date without the calendar up, but it's 2 weekends before Thanksgiving. And it's back in Somerset, New Jersey at our original hotel that we had for the original fly fishing show. And so a lot of heritage there, but the fly tying, that's the International Fly Tyers Symposium. I just did some work for him. I think there was something like 60 some fly tyers that'll be continuously demonstrating plus featured seminars. We also have that at the show. There's featured fly tyers, but we have a whole fly tying section. So there's always fly tyers tying continuously the whole event. And, again, many of the veterans customers that come in, they spend a lot of time at the fly tyers if they're a tyer. Even some of them like to just watch, like I said, or they befriended some of them. And, many of those guys are also experts on local waters. So you might watch them tie flies while you're talking about, that fly, and then you just buy some of the flies from them. And now you know exactly how to fish the fly
Yep.
from the designer of that fly.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, we just had a podcast yesterday with Jonathan Farmer, who's like a steelhead Pacific salmon tying. He's got these beautiful flies, but he was talking about that same thing. How people buying his flies, it's unique. It's specific. He's got this specific style that you really can't buy anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what you get the show as well. And you get to make the connection personally with the folks, which is cool.
Yeah, just I'm a fly designer as well. I've got a number of flies that are contracted by or produced by several companies. They even sometimes take liberties that that they have to do for commercial tying, but you kind of sometimes might be like, oh, that's not quite right.
Right, right.
Is that if when you talk to the designers of the flies, it can be very interesting to see and ask. It's something that you can talk to someone about, and it's not just a recipe. We can get online and we can get recipes for flies. We can look in books, and I compare that to like cooking. You can cook some great food by looking up stuff online or through books. You're not going to become a chef. And any chef would be like, yeah, that's good, but you're not, what about this? Or how would you do that? And you're like, I don't know. I'd have to look it up.
Yeah.
A fly designer is like the chef. And, you can copy people's patterns and tie your own, whatever it is. And that's great. But sometimes I've even seen people, and I've had people with my own flies who are like, oh, I was using this material. I'm like, well, I tried that material, but here's why I chose this material. And you can explain to them like, well, maybe what they were using that you had tried in the evolution of your fly design, maybe it was too flashy, maybe it didn't float well enough, or maybe it didn't, or didn't sink well enough, or wasn't flashy enough, or whatever aspect it might have that you adjusted, and you can explain to them that difference, and then they'll try the material that you use and be like, wow, that is better, or it does catch more fish, or it is more durable, or whatever it might be. You can talk to those designers and they explain why they chose the materials. And that's the true expert that can explain why they chose the materials that they use in the design of their fly. And, whether that's even fly tying or, fly line manufacturing or something that's one of the more secretive aspects of our whole industry, you can still talk to those people and be like, well, why are you using this and what makes it better? And they can explain it to you. So when you test those fly lines, you can see if oh yeah, that makes a difference to me. And I really like that for my style of casting or fishing, and come up with something that you're going to enjoy more. It's going to last longer and help you perform better and enjoy the sport better.
Yeah, that's perfect. I'm going to take it out here pretty quick, Ben, with this is our kind of Wet Fly Swing Pro listener shout out, and we've got a members community. Ben D, shout out to Ben. He's in there. He's traveling around the country as well for work. So he's hitting a bunch of different places. He's talking about how he's in Atlanta one day and he's in California the next. But today, this is presented by Yellowstone Teton Territory, which is one of our partners, and they're doing some cool stuff. We're actually doing a trip with Phil. We mentioned Phil Roy. We're doing a trip over to Henry's Lake with Phil, just right around the corner to that part of the country. And then we've got another one with Pete Erickson with our Euro nymphing stuff school out there. So shout out to Yellowstone Teton Territory. First off, are you familiar with that area at all? That, kind of the Yellowstone, Henry's Lake, South Fork Snake, all that stuff?
Me, yeah. Yeah. I haven't fished a ton of that, but I love the Yellowstone area. I went up there last year with my kid for his fall break.
Yeah, we've been up there a few times. We're getting up there. Hopefully, we're going to do some stuff every year. But we're also, like you mentioned, Colorado. We're doing a trip with Landon next year, so that's going to be. I'm excited about that because I've never fished. Actually, I've kind of fished Colorado, but this will be the first time actually being guided with our group. So this is going to be a lot of fun. But I want to ask you on this as we take it out of here. I think we asked this to you before, but traveling, I know you've done some fishing around, but do you have a place still on that bucket list you want to get to?
Every place.
Yeah. Yeah. You love it all. Salt and fresh.
I suffer heavily from around the next bend syndrome.
Yeah.
So any place that I go, I just keep, I don't want to quit, and I want to go back, and I want to try different things. So I've never been to a place that I don't want to go back, and I want to go to every other place. So I suffer from that a lot. I look forward to the next place that I'm going.
Yeah. So that's it. So pretty much you name a place, probably any place on the planet, you'd be up for going there and checking it out.
Yeah. We talked about steelhead. I'm going steelhead fishing in October for 4 days up in Terrace, BC.
Oh, you're hitting BC. Yeah.
Yeah. I've never been up there. They're having a record steelhead run this year, so I'm super excited about it. And when you mentioned the steelhead flies, I was cautious sticking in my head and getting me excited about that. And I was thinking about patterns that I need to tie up for that trip.
Yeah. You should definitely check out. We have our In the Bucket podcast, part of our network. Brian Niska up at there at Skeena Spay Lodge. He hosts our Spay podcast. So he does these In the Bucket episodes, and he's had some really good stuff. So you can check that out if you want to hear some of his. It's pretty cool to hear because I do these interviews and I'm more of a kind of a novice fly fisherman asking questions from that end. But we also now have folks like Brian hosting our show who are the experts, and then they're bringing on other experts. So it's been really fun for me to listen to those. But shout out to Brian on that. But so steelhead, and I mean, I was up there a couple years ago. We got into a few fish. I don't think the run was as big as it is this year, right? So this is a big, I think, and I've heard all around the Pacific Rim that numbers are up, which is a good thing.
Yeah, hopefully that continues, and it's just not like a good year because the steelhead Steelhead have been struggling, and if you talk about that, it's not necessarily a trip or location, but I have to say that steelhead and Atlantic salmon are probably two of the most like iconic and amazing fish, not only for fly fishing because they're legendary in fly fishing, especially the Atlantics, but just what they go through in their life cycle is just so impressive. And there's no probably, I wouldn't rate them as my favorite fish. My favorite fish is a permit, but as far as just respecting that fish and holding it in your hands and watching it swim away, there's probably no other fish besides those two that should touch your soul more because their journey is amazing.
Yeah, the journey is amazing. And have you fished for Atlantic salmon?
I have, yes.
Yeah. What have you fished? Like, what parts? Have you had some success?
Yeah, I've fished Iceland the most, and I've done very well there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very well. I mean, I think my best day was I landed 13.
Wow.
It's pretty good for Atlantics.
I just had a guest on from the UK, and he actually is down fishes, in that area, Scotland stuff. He says the runs there are not good, but he says he travels to Iceland because it's so good. And he was mentioning there's a couple of rivers or areas out there where they actually plant Atlantic salmon. They're really successful. I'm not sure if those are some of the areas you're in, but yeah. So I guess they're doing some planting. They're having success with hatchery fish, I guess.
Yeah, well, no, I think you're better using the term planting than hatchery because I've watched, and what they're doing is they're actually, we participated in it. I mean, I was fishing a river in Iceland the last week of the season, so they have seasons there that they close to protect the spawning fish. But what we did is a couple of the fish that appeared to be ready is we caught them. They would take them and put them into, for lack of a better description, like a fish trap that's in the river in a place where they could hold the fish. And then when they were ready, they harvested the eggs, but then planted them again back in the river. So there's diverse genetics. It's not hatchery. You don't have breeders that are
it's not 30 individuals making the whole run.
Yeah, it's still diverse. There's not like the lack of genetic diversity.
Yeah.
They're wild fish. Yeah, they're wild fish. They're hatched in the rivers that they go to genetically to spawn. What they're doing is trying to create a more successful reproduction level and protect those eggs that they may also put in another protected pen so predators aren't getting them, people aren't stepping on them, cattle or sheep there or whatever, and it's so they have a better reproduction rate, but they're 100% wild fish.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting, idea for spawning fish, and they are seeing the returns in those rivers. So I know one individual that's worked on one river with success, and they're working on it in another river now. And if they get the similar results, now they have scientific data to show that it wasn't just, luck in one river.
Yeah.
It's a direct result of this effort. And that's really cool because, that could be something, there's a lot of debate on that and, arguments over the steelhead, for example, because hatchery fish hurt the wild fish population.
Yeah,
it's proven.
Yeah.
But we want catchable fish too. So
yeah,
how do we find a happy medium in that kind of stuff?
Right. Yeah, and the Atlantic salmon thing is interesting because steelhead in the U.S. isn't that long of a history if you think about it, right? Compared to say over in the U.K., which the Atlantic, how long have they been fishing for those over there?
Oh yeah.
Right. So, I mean, that is good. So hopefully, fingers crossed, that's going to help. And maybe they can bring that over to like Scotland and some of those other areas that are struggling. And of course, you have ocean conditions, which is the other X factor that, of course, you got to factor in. But no, this is interesting. Well, do you have any on that topic? Do you guys cover conservation at the shows? Is that something you're thinking about? I know that's something we're always trying to think about. But I find that when we do podcast episodes around conservation, they're always our least listened to podcast episodes. What's your take?
That's very interesting to hear you say that. Yes, we absolutely have that at the shows. And what's interesting about you saying that is it's very critical to our passion. We need to make sure that we conserve this stuff. I mean, I single-handedly could go probably wipe out the Gunnison River in
Right.
my home turf within a couple of years if I just wanted to just whack everything that I caught
Yep.
or throw them in the bushes. I mean, I could clean it out myself. So we need to have regulations and conservation and teach people how to handle fish. I mean, that's a big thing with, and a negative thing that we see with like social media, for example, is, people want to have their great photos. And I've watched people on the river killing fish because they spend too much time photographing them,
Right.
especially when it's a trophy fish, because that fish also fought harder and longer and is more tired. So you have to be careful with it. Talk about Lefty and others that are professional anglers and photographers. I've worked with those people. And if you catch a big fish with them, they're coaching you through the photographs. They're like, okay, put that fish back in the water, give them some breath. Okay, now lift them this way. And it's not just holding the fish out of the water. It's a quick couple of shots. The majority of the time that fish is reviving in the water, just as you would revive it. And you got a couple of photos. And then when you let it go, it swims away healthily and it kicks it out of your hands. So we have many conservation groups that are at our shows that you can hear their story. You can become members. You can volunteer for it. Talk to them about whether you're a member or not. You can find out more about their active projects that they work on or who they are if you don't know who they are. But the interesting part that you say about the least listened to is I often have those same groups that want to do talks at our show. And I'm always supportive of it. But the thing that I tell them, first of all, is like, look, we need to figure out how to sell your presentation in the 7 or less words of the title of your presentation.
Right. Yeah.
Because if it just says, people are coming to our show just like they're listening to your talk to be entertained and learn something. So they're coming to our show to learn stuff and be entertained. They don't want to feel like, oh, wow, it's a downer to hear about
No.
like,
The collapse of the steelhead runs.
right. Although it's important. So how do we engage new listeners, new customers to want to participate in that? But I'll tell you, the thing is, I'm sure in your talks and you yourself in those, when you talk to those experts that do that conservation stuff, although the subject matter is about the conservation, you're probably learning things that you never knew from these experts, because often you're talking to people that study the environment and these fish, and they may know things that we never even learn as just anglers.
Yeah, definitely.
Because they're scientists and, for example, and they just know certain things that we would never learn. So you are going to learn stuff from those talks.
You are. Yeah, you are, for sure.
But yeah, it's tough to get the same response because it just doesn't sound as exciting.
Yeah, it doesn't sound good. It doesn't have the title. Yeah, exactly. I always think of it as the 3 E's. You entertain, educate, get emotion. And like when I'm doing a podcast episode, if I get one of those, that's kind of okay. 2 of those, you're doing pretty good. And if you get all 3 of those in one podcast episode, then you're doing really good. That's like a home run.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's always part of it. And yeah, I mean, and we just did an episode with the Huron River Watershed Council out of Michigan because we're doing our Schultz smallmouth bass trip kind of
cool.
event coming up. And so, yeah, it was really interesting. I mean, that's Detroit, like literally Detroit, Michigan, right? The capital of the car. I mean, that is drains right into the Huron River. But they've done a lot of good work to protect it. And there's a lot of good fishing there too, right? The smallmouth bass, they're more of a warm water species. So anyways, I'm always interested. I always find that if I'm interested in it, there's probably a few people out there listening who will be too. So that's always my barometer.
I've done a lot of urban fishing, and
you have?
Surprised. I mean, I've fished some, even talking about steelhead. I've fished some steelhead rivers in some cities around different Great Lakes where, you're looking at the river and you're like, this is a beautiful river going downtown where there's like, there's people living in the bushes and there's shopping carts in the river. But you kind of block that stuff out, and it's a beautiful river and you're catching amazing fish.
Wow.
And sometimes on those, talking even about the conservation efforts, you're like, I wonder like how little effort it would take to just educate, especially like the youth that live in an area like that they're just basically getting taught, like, toss your trash into the river, and you teach them clean up that river, and you've got a playground that like you can do stuff rather than getting into trouble in the city. You've got a little escape zone and very little effort to get that going.
Yeah, definitely. Nice, Ben. Well, I think that's a good place to wrap it up on that note. And I think we'll send everybody out to flyfishingshow.com. And like you said, this is right around the corner. It's, what is it now? It's October now, but coming up here, but we only have a few months, and January is right around the corner. Any words of advice for people listening now, or, to take advantage of the show coming up here?
Just keep posted. We do have tickets available now. You can buy your tickets in advance. And film festival happens the first night of any of our shows. So if it's a 3-day, it's a Friday night. If it's a 2-day event, it's Saturday night. That gives you an incentive to make a weekend or a couple of days out of it. And then you can also book your hotels. Travel to the show and spend some time there. I mean, if you're, 10 minutes down, I don't see any reason to spend the night at the show. But if you do want to attend the film festival and drink some beers, you don't have to worry about transportation, and you can stay at the event and mingle with the pros, and you never know what's going to come out of that. So it's really a fun environment, and it's like a mini vacation that you can do in the off season when we're just daydreaming about fish. Right. And that's why our season is so condensed, because it's when people aren't fishing in most cases.
Yeah, that's the only time. Yeah, January, February, March.
Yeah.
Nice. All right, Ben. Well, until the next one, thanks again for all your time, and looking forward to hopefully seeing you at the shows coming up.
Yeah, same here. I really appreciate you having me on. It was awesome talking with you, and I look forward to the next time.
All right. Call to action today. You can purchase your tickets, as Ben said, right now. If you want online, you can get those tickets in advance. And if you're going, I would love to hear which show you're going to. Send me an email, dave@wetflyswing.com. I would love to attend that show with you if you're heading out there. I'm going to try to get around the country this year and get to a few of these shows. All right, if you get a chance, also please follow this show, the Fly Fishing. This is not the Fly Fishing Show. This is the Fly Fishing Podcast. But if you get a chance to follow us, that supports us. And I just want to give a shout out to the trip we mentioned on the show, Landon Mayer. We're going to be heading out there with Landon to fish for trout in Colorado. If you're interested in this, you can check back with me as well. All right, I'm keeping this one as short as possible because I'm heading out on the road myself. This is the final one we're doing before we get out of here, so I hope you have a great morning. I hope you have a great afternoon or great evening wherever you are in the country. Looking forward to catching you on that next episode soon. Talk to you then.
Thanks for listening to the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show. For notes and links from this episode, visit wetflyswing.com.